Welcome to the Boiling Point. I have Brian Grinestaff, our parts manager. He's also over all of our inside salespeople. So today's not what they normally think. We got all these parts here. We're not looking from a selling standpoint, because you actually do that with BoilerWarehouse.com, and he is the brains behind BoilerWarehouse.com. But what we wanted to do is, because there's so many operators and folks out there that are taking care of boiler rooms that may be thrown into the job, and it's like, what do I do? So Brian came up with an idea to talk about how do you actually look in a boiler room to even have spare parts. And so why don't you take us through that process and what these guys should be doing, or ladies.
Yeah, so we get calls all the time to talk about, hey, what should I be stocking? What are my spare parts? Or, a customer will call us and just with a generic statement of, hey, quote me a spare parts list. Mm-hmm. Well, spare parts list for a boiler room can mean a lot of different things. Yes. And a lot of it comes down to, the perishable items that you have that you're going to go through every year. It's not a mechanical failure type thing, but it's a maintenance type thing, like your sight glass, your gaskets. You're going to open and close your boiler. You're going to clean it out. Those things are a given. Mm-hmm. But what people really have a hard time doing is discerning, okay, well, what else should I have? Mm-hmm. And, we would recommend in those scenarios for people to really, get a full boiler room parts audit. Mm. Really look at the mechanical items that you've got around. All this stuff, you've got switches that move, motors that move. These are all points of failure at some point. Mm-hmm. So for us, it's like, okay, let's go through the complete boiler room. Let's get a burner spare parts list. Let's get a boiler spare parts list. Look at your instrumentation. Really give a full in-depth quote with pricing and availability. How long does it take for us to get these items?
So fittings might be products that are easy to get, but there's other items from a lead time standpoint that really get out there.
Yeah, and so that's what the audit really does for you. It puts the pricing and availability in front of you, and you can look down the list of items and you can see, okay, what are the long lead time items? What does my vendor have on the shelf? Is this something that I'm comfortable with being down for a day while I do this maintenance if something fails?
Right.
Is it something like a blower motor that is 4 to 6 weeks long to get?
Right.
And
Max
a lot of those,
Max on valve.
and we've seen our vendors are starting to stock less. Mm-hmm. You've got manufacturers that have delays with issues. Honeywell and Maxon's been going through some struggles here recently. Mm-hmm. So a lot of that spare parts inventory is drying up, and it's really, if you thought you were going to call somebody and get something next day on a lot of that stuff, it's not quite happening that way anymore. Mm-hmm. We at BoilerWarehouse.com, we've got a large inventory. We got a lot of hard to find stuff, but there's a lot of specialized stuff out there.
Sure.
There's certain manufacturers, they're blower motors, they're machined, they're tapped a certain way.
Yep.
You're not going to find a motor on a shelf somewhere and think you're just going to swap this thing out.
Right.
Same thing, Grundfos pumps. People think, oh, well, those are Baldor motors. No, they have thrust bearings, downward thrust on them, and you're not going to just pick up one of those motors anywhere. So, it's really good for you to look through that audit that you do and say, what can I live with? Mm-hmm. Anything you see that's outside that range, that's what you should really look at stocking for your spare parts.
Right.
The electrodes, the gaskets, those are relatively cheap items. You got to go through that stuff. That's a no-brainer. Have that stuff on hand. If you get a leak, you need to be able to take care of it. You get a sight glass that's starting to leak or something like that, you need to be able to replace those things.
Sure.
But for a lot of our process customers, we always hear, oh, I'm losing hundreds of thousands of dollars while I'm down. Mm-hmm. Well, why don't you have this $4,000 blower motor that's keeping you,
exactly.
on your shelf?
Exactly.
So, and we try to stock as much as we can, but everybody's stuff is so specialized.
Yeah.
So you really got to figure out what your threshold for that pain is.
I think one of the great things that you said here was that you actually take an actual assessment and write down all that's in your boiler room and really take the assessment of it is probably one of the most important things to do. Obviously we do some things on Boiling Point where we've talked about a lot of these things, but the emphasis that I think we want everybody to understand is that what Brian said is get that assessment done and find out these lead times on some of these hard items that's going to keep you down and keep that manufacturing or the heating from going down.
Yeah, and we don't mind having conversations with people. Like, if you call in and you want us to help you out with that stuff, give us the model and serial number of all of your equipment. We'll go back to the manufacturers. We'll get OEM breakdowns on what was supplied with your equipment, and we'll come up with that for you. We can quote that stuff to you. We can give you lead times on everything, and then we can have an honest discussion. Like, okay, hey, is this something that you can find anywhere? Is it an item like this mod motor here that you can probably find in any supply warehouse, even after hours at night?
Sure.
Well, okay, you might not need that.
Right.
But if it's a transmitter that nobody else stocks and, maybe it's across the country where you normally get it, well, that's a different story.
Sure.
So we can have honest conversations with people on, identifying that stuff, what fits their pain threshold, and come up with a plan within a certain budget. I know these maintenance guys have budgets they have to deal with, and, it's easy for us to say you should stock everything.
Yeah.
But the reality is, you got budgets you need to work with. Let's identify the items that really are probably going to fail quicker than others, and identify those for you.
There's been a big shift over the years here into the burner management to where the technology has really stepped up, and a lot of people like to just put one on the boiler but don't have any type of spares.
Yeah, I mean, controls, when you're in boiler rooms, and we see different levels of boiler rooms from, somebody who's got a small hydronic boiler to, multi-1,000 pound an hour boilers, 100,000, 100+ pound an hour boilers. And the panels and the instrumentation and the controls for all those vary in fanciness.
Sure.
And when you start talking about fancier controls, in some cases, you start talking about controls that, are not found on shelves, that, having some sort of redundancy there is needed.
Even found on the shelves from the people that sold it to them.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And even then, you have custom programming on a lot of stuff.
Sure.
If you're talking about an Allen Bradley PLC where somebody's come in and they've set your programming up, what happens if that thing, fries?
Right. Right.
What are you going to do?
Right.
So you need to think from a contingency standpoint of how you can get back up and running as fast as you need to.
Right.
And those components certainly need to be addressed. The software side of it, how long does it take for me to get my programming back up to where it needs to be? Those are all questions that you need to do in your assessment as well.
And one of the things you said too was was that I think you have to resource somebody like us or anyone that is, because that parts house or their local service company, they're a resource to them as well. So, when you said, hey, we're looking up all these numbers and stuff, there's other companies that do those things too.
Oh, certainly.
And so find out, who has that so that you can get all this stuff done.
Yeah, and we try to be as honest and upfront about, this is really what the industry
We don't try,
has.
we are.
We are. Well,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we're going to have honest conversations with people on this is the stuff you're going to find, and if you've got local guys that you work with, lean on those guys.
Sure.
See, verify the data that's in front of you. Hey, here's what I'm seeing here. Help me out with my spare parts. What can you do for me? And make sure that you're comfortable. It's all about what are you comfortable with being downtime wise.
Right.
Because you hear people say, well, I can't be down for a week. Well, that's where you need to be. You need to figure out how to get below that pain threshold.
Yeah. Think of some of these hospitals that are not necessarily prepared in the wintertime, and we got a lot of patients and other things. So awesome stuff. Great information. Well, now you know, so now you can be prepared. And we'll see you next time on The Boiling Point. Well, appreciate Brian hanging out with us today and giving us some super information. Now, just a little bit of a plug, boilerwarehouse.com. We've got our website out there, but we have a new one that is getting ready to drop on the internet. The functionality is just outstanding. Quick search and all the parts that you may need. Now, whether you use us or you use someone else, again, all of Brian's info was so very important. Power Gen's coming up. Make sure that you come and see us on November the 19th, 2021. We have a free t-shirt for you, and we'd love to see you at our booth. Well, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter if you don't mind. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as always, if you like our videos, make sure you share them. Check out all of the things on WARE Boiler YouTube. There's steam culture. You've got your weekly boiler tips. So much information out there. Make sure you check them out. We'll see you next time on The Boiling Point.